video game crash. I think this is true. A lot less people are investing into gaming.
Video games as a whole may not be crashing, but perhaps the types of games that lots of us love are experiencing a bit of a crash.
Live
Let
service.
me explain. I'm going to start with John and Brenda Romero. They were obviously there for the game crash of the 80s. They've had ups and downs, so whenever they said that the current state of the industry is, to quote, definitely crashier than back in the infamous 1980s crash, it's probably time to listen. And not just because they're big legacy names and you might think about Doom or something. No, it's also because they literally run a game studio today. It's a few hours down the road from me in Galway, which is to say they're in the real games industry. And they're speaking to a real problem that you'll hear talked about in game industry circles, that you'll hear be talked about between devs.
What do it be?
But it hasn't really made it out to the public. But make no mistake, this game crash is impacting you. And scrappy indie devs are amazing, but they're not yet the solution. We have a lot to cover today, and by the end, a lot of the vibes that you may have felt, I think, will start to make a lot more sense. We've got big names saying it feels crashier now than it did in the 80s. That, of course, doesn't make any sense if you don't know just what the hell went on in the 80s. Basically, it happened in the US where a big...
They buried him, bro. Grade 0. I love this.
Big surge of cheap,
they
terrible
buried
games
them
for
in the
Atari
desert
consoles
in Mexico.
Just led to retailers refusing to stock games from publishers. They were quite literally getting overloaded with slop, and a lot of that slop ended up in the landfills. Now, as we talked about before, the growth of digital distribution and platform-agnostic games means that the crash just cannot happen in the same way today as it did way back then. We're in a...
I think that's a great point that he's making, and I think he's right about that. That it's a much more multifaceted industry now. And so back then it was much more monolithic.
A totally different era for getting games to players. It's way more diversified. There are so many games, perhaps too many games, and no good way to get them right in front of players. That problem won't go away, but it is an entirely different problem to the problem of today. Because when the Romeros talk about being in a crash, they're looking at it from the other end of the spectrum. Not buying games, but actually making the damn things.
And investing in them.
To make them, you need to somehow pay for them. And the funding collapse, especially in Western markets, is completely goddamn brutal. Now, the Romeros felt this firsthand whenever Xbox pulled the plug on their next game.
I've had people ask me to directly fund games. Like I have, and the reason why is that they're not really able to get money out of these games at all. They did it to themselves,
Remember, big like Xbox layoffs, all of that stuff that was happening.
Demo ideas.
Well, their game got cancelled. And the thing is, they were technically lucky. According to a GDC survey, 1 in 3 developers in the US had been laid off in the last 2 years. And
hey guys, but you own the chuds, didn't you? Great. Wow. Amazing. Meanwhile, Capcom's hiring. Get naturally selected.
I'm not sure what the numbers
Go
are
back
for
to
UK
McDonald's.
and Ireland, and the Romeros are now based in Ireland, but I think you do get the point. It's pretty rough out there. When a AAA studio or an indie collapses and all those developers are left scrambling, they don't just magically become new indie devs ready to launch new projects. Many I'd wager, have to simply leave the industry. You know, because they need to do things like
make money
eat or support their families. Now that means you lose out on all of their game making knowledge. If you ever think, why do a series of games?
Think about how much game making knowledge we've lost out on after all of the developers of Concord went back to McDonald's. It's like burning the Library of Alexandria, but it's actually more like shutting down the Clown College.
Or maybe some long-running game, whatever it may be. Maybe you think, oh, they're repeating the same mistakes again, or, oh, the new content just doesn't feel quite as crafted or whatever as it used to in the past. Very often, it's because knowledge has just walked out the door. And while getting a job at another AAA or something similar is possible, it's actually really quite unlikely. There's a massive oversupply in the games jobs market right now because, well, all of those layoffs. And all this means that if those people want to continue making games, they've got to pay for development costs. There's a little bit of a problem there because development costs have goddamn skyrocketed. Now then, the first bit of meat for this
And
video.
also, we need to play this, Mina the Hollower. I think this is a huge issue too, is that a lot of these big studios, they spend too much money on things that don't matter. That's probably the biggest issue. They fired the fat chuds and kept the nine. Yeah, they fired all the chuds and they kept the idiots and the foids.
An analyst group called Hush Crasher recently put out a deep dive on how much it costs to make games right now.
Yeah.
And it's pretty rough. So they found that the average game development budget, regardless of scale, has doubled since 2015. And as soon as you start looking at AA and AAA teams, you see the budgets have tripled. So at the top,
I understand that I think this is like valid, but I don't think it's as valid as Bellier might be making it out to be, because you can look at a lot of counterpoints of people that are able to make a video game. For example, Black Myth Wukong, Ghosts of Yotai was also made at a very relatively low budget. You have Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. The best example, of course, is Expedition 33. And then you have these other smaller studios that are able to develop a game for less money. So if you're not able to do that, well, Asian studios, well, that's why I use multiple examples, right? I use multiple examples from multiple places.
and it's gone completely insane. Yeah. But even the smallest solo games are still getting more and more expensive to make than they were, say, 10 years ago. And of course, as with everything else, some of that is just inflation as the world undergoes economic chaos, madness. But inflation isn't everything. So these analysts found that without inflation, 2025 budgets would have been 28% lower than they were. But the rest is actually just higher costs. Costs that have to be earned back when they sell a game to you if the studio wants to, survive and maybe make another game.
Yeah.
Which is the really important thing. But to focus in on costs, this increased cost is often just attributed to team size. But it's more than just that. It's paying, yes, perhaps more devs, but also ones with more specialized roles. And even the likes of, your management, your producers, all those things can increase a budget. But so too will the one thing that can make a game stand out to you, the audience, and that's increasingly needed as more and more games get released, and that
marketing
scope. Now that doesn't mean that everyone's suddenly out there making open world games. That would be insane. But it does mean you've got to look a certain way at your game. Your game will have to feel a certain way. It'll have to meet quality of life and content standards that are far higher than they were 10 years ago.
Didn't play this one.
A developer can make the same game they made.
I think that he's right about that. The reason why these indie games are costing more money to make is because they are larger in scope, they are competing in a broader market, and they also can appeal to a broader market. So, like, for example, Undertale was a cult classic that probably didn't cost a whole lot of money to make at all. But the reality is that if you're competing with other games that are, way higher budget, obviously you have to have some degree of competitive advantage.
A decade ago for the same cost, or maybe less. But the thing is, to stand out, they would probably need more money. And the really rough thing is that getting any money at all is where the trouble truly starts. The most damning graph Hush Crasher shares is this. And even if you're a solo dev, basically, you've now got to scrape together as much money to self-publish your game as a publisher would have once handed you. Somehow. Meanwhile then, publishers are basically just betting on games that they think are more likely to break through and give them a good rate of return. Yeah. So the cost of delivering a game is going up, and the people holding the purse strings are basically tighter than ever. I mean, 2025, just for one example, saw the lowest gaming startup...
Holy shit! It's a 90% drop from COVID. Now, I also think this is a misleading graph. And the reason why I think this is a misleading graph is because there are secondary variables that were related to gaming that made them more attractive to venture capital during 2021 and 2022 that have dropped off since then. Primarily cryptocurrency integration, Web3 integration, and most importantly, NFTs. So these things are what really kind of bloated the amount of money that was invested into these products back at this period, because companies were able to potentially sell the idea of infinity money, right? They were supposed to sell the idea of, being the first Google or something like that. So this is such a massive corollary that I don't know necessarily if these numbers are accurate. I think that we really should look at these numbers here from like 2020, and this one's 2019 here, right? But even if you do that, like I would take these out and remove them because I feel like, again, it was a secondary variable that was causing this investment to occur. But, and again, that's my opinion generally. But that being said, if you look at how much it's gone down even then, it's like nothing, right? And also, this is year to date, which means that, so it's June, right? And I don't know when this was actually taken, but, it will maybe be double this, right? And even double this is half of what it was. Correlates inverse proportionally to the rise of woke slop games, which makes everything flop. Well, yes and no, because 2021 and 2022 had more woke slop, and now we have way less woke slop, but you also have way less investment. I think that there's a lot of variables, and being woke or not is like a tier 3 variable, not a tier 1 variable. I think that whenever you want to talk about investment and venture capital and angel investors, you need to be looking at what the theoretical ceiling for an investment return could be. And I think that's the reason why these numbers in the middle were so high.
Funding since 2019, and most of what was there went into mobile
That's what I
games
think.
and betting. But to put that in terms that we'll feel as players, it basically means more trend chasing, less chance follow-up games, and developers who may just crash and burn before their game can be great.
Can't win
a
them
big
all.
reason why very often a game launches and is kinda shit, or disappointing, maybe full of bugs, full of performance issues.
Do you want to know the reason why? It's because of something called MVP. Not most valuable player, minimum viable product. When minimum viable product is your sales pitch, that's your product offering. Oh, wow. How exciting. Can't wait.
It's because often the developer has literally no choice but to publish.
Yeah,
and
they
so
have
often
to.
the developer
They
will
have to
take
go to
the
market.
brunt,
Ashley
even
Creation, I
though,
think, had this happen.
in many cases, if you were to say, audit all of their emails and communications, you would find devs basically begging publishers for time. It's one of those tricky things within game development where, funnily enough, an extremely advanced 2-year software project is something that's very hard to perfectly plan down to the month in advance. Yet, that ends up being a situation all too many devs fall into. But what makes the situation even harder for you or me, say, just people who want to play fun video games, it's that games are a really bad investment, unless you specifically are someone who wants to fund and make video games. If you're an investor holding $100,000, which is enough to pay, say, a 3-person team, decent enough
Probably for like 2 years at the most, though.
Salaries for a year, well,
yeah.
Where are you going to get a better return on that $100,000? Could it be, say, an indie game that might need another year of investment?
Just put it in NVIDIA, bro. Just put it in NVIDIA, put it in fucking Apple, put it in Microsoft, put it in like 10 different companies. What do you just put it in the stock market, man?
Or is it just putting that money into a market tracking account?
Yeah!
There's risk in both sides, but I think we'd all admit that the game side has way more risk.
And there's way more overhead too, because now there's like a bunch of extra knowledge that you need to have in order to know why something like that's happening.
Even if it does pay off and, a game does come out and is maybe even profitable, it may still lose to simply just leaving money in the market. Here's a quote. I think about those projects, especially over the last 5 years, what didn't get made because no one would give them $100,000. What could have changed the way we thought about games because that game was only ever going to make $500,000, which would change a developer's life. Now, that quote was from Rebecca Saltzman, who's the CEO of Finji. They're a publisher, most recently of Night in the Woods and Tunic. Now, she was talking to PC Gamer.
Tunic did really well. It was very well received. I don't know about the other game.
About the funding squeeze that's facing indie devs right now, where basically the traditional money people want Vampire Survivors or Balatro-style successes from solo devs, or are trying to go and back the next Expedition 33 with a budget of millions. Small teams making small games without that huge potential just aren't worth a publisher's time. and raising funds from out.
I remember we made this decision when I was still involved with OTK. We made this decision on funding a game. It was called Splody. And we talked about it. It was like, obviously everybody was there. This is like 3 or 4 years ago whenever we started that. And we basically made the decision and we were like, this game is like really niche. It might not ever make money, but it's a really cool game. We don't have to put that much into doing it. Let's just do it. And that's what we did. And I think that unless you have that outlook, you're probably not going to make it for a long time inside of the industry. Does that happen before Mad Mushroom? No, this was one of the first Mad Mushroom games.
Side of games is extremely
How'd that go?
hard.
I honestly don't even know. I have no idea. I wasn't involved at that point.
Because if you look at the balance sheet of any
I don't think it sold super well,
video
but
game
I don't know if they made the money back or not.
studio, it's going to look horrible if you're a traditional, say, financial institution. Now, even if a developer somehow does get the funds and launches, well, the cost of publishing can still kill them after release. Most developers work on a recoup model, where until their funding is paid off from game revenue, developers get somewhere between nothing and almost nothing.
Yeah.
All those studios that form from, say, laid-off devs who magically secure funding and build their game for an audience that
It was
likes
sad to see this game. As far as I know, this game really didn't catch on very well. It was unfortunate. This is made by the original developers of StarCraft.
that they may still collapse in the aftermath. And there's a specific way that this whole dynamic hurts us as customers so badly. So let me explain, because it's more than just, oh, you know, game came out, we don't have any money, now we're gone. Right. So whenever your game comes out,
I
you'll
played it.
get a bunch
I
of
talked
money
with the
into
devs
Steam.
too.
Now that, of course, go to your publisher. Then
made by
it will go
Frost
through the
Giant
recoup,
Studios.
and then you will be paid.
RTS. I think the next RTS has to be autoplay. I think that the skill gap of and the frenetic nature of managing conflicts while at the same time managing economies fundamentally isn't fun. Like, it's just simply not fun to play. And I think you're never going to have an RTS that's successful that isn't autoplay. And I know people might not want to hear that, but that's my honest interpretation of where the genre is at right now. And that's the reason why, for example, like Clash Royale is popular.
Now, you could be paid in payment terms that are like, say, net 45. So it could be quite a bit of time until you actually get money. Maybe 1 or 2 payroll cycles. That could be pretty damn challenging. But here's the thing. The amount of money that you will get in an early stage of your game's recoup will almost certainly not be enough to cover your burn rate unless your game is a real outlier success. So what that basically means is, before you ship your game, you need to have funding lined up for your next game. How the hell do you do that? Well, you've got to actually develop a prototype for that game. You've got to have your pitch. You've got to go around trying to sell.
And the other thing, and like, I don't know if he's going to talk about this, but as somebody who's, you know, closer to this, one of the biggest weaknesses there is because if your funding is drying up, one of the best ways that you can secure future funding is by prior success. So, for example, if you had somebody that previously funded you and you were like, we made your money back, we were able to give you a 10% return, this is bigger in scope, we have a better idea, we have more experience now, can you give us, you know, last time you gave us 200 grand, this time can we get 4 million, right? And like, if you can do that, then obviously broken system, it's not a broken system. What I'm saying is that basically the bottom fell out of it. And so now all of those previous investors they could go back to are no longer in the market to fund them anymore. So they can't rely on previous successes and existing relationships because they've exited the market.
But to publish
$4 million is an insane increase. Well, yeah. I mean, obviously it is. Yeah. Duh.
or maybe trying to find some, like, you know, government, like local economic growth fund stuff, any of that. Now, do you know what that's maybe not ideal for? The first game coming out at a perfect level of quality. Because if the studio puts 100% of their focus into just that one game, yeah, that may well increase the chances of it having less bugs, less issues, you know, polished stuff. But it's also fairly likely that it will leave a developer basically up shit creek without a paddle, because if you don't...
And you can see, right? Yacht Club says it's make or break for the studio after delaying Mina the Hollower. I feel like How much is this? Yeah, how much is this? How much is the game? Because I'm trying to think about how much money it is. $20? In the lifetime of this game, it will be a success, but even something like this, I feel like probably the number is probably about 200,000. That's going to be pretty close. It will be. Like, that's going to be hard for them to make money, even with a pretty big success like that, which is really sad.
Have that funding lined up well in advance. It is a bit of a tough
all in on
shit
Baldur's Gate 3.
situation,
Sven Vick even
and
put up his own money.
you could
Yeah.
go under, which would mean that even if your publisher does continue to sell your game, and they almost certainly would be, obviously, well, the recoup won't matter anymore. It'll just all go to the publisher. And this is the kind of thing, the kind of incentive structure that can put all of us against each other, that can make it so that a developer may be just tearing themselves up trying to make everything work, but absolutely know that unless they can secure maybe some prototype funding for their next game, that they can't just focus on the launch of their current game. Because if they do, they risk the entire company just going kaput. Which is to say, it's a fairly grim situation.
Yeah, you can't go. You can't get off the saddle. You have to just keep going.
All around.
The developers
But
even need publishers.
There are certainly indie games that you and I have seen
they do.
that have sold insane quantities, especially relative to
But this is the problem. The issue with this is that it's like streaming, right? Where like somebody sees like, oh my God, this guy's got like 10,000 viewers and he has millions of dollars. All I have to do is get this many viewers and I can get $100,000. So the idea of that is that there's such a massive spotlight put on the 0.01% anomalies that you have a survivorship bias that is totally like not representative at all.
team size. That's meant many of those teams have a pretty nice amount of cash lying around. And the good news is that some of those teams are now trying to fix the problem. Outer Sloth are not a games publisher, and they're not a knockoff of Inner Sloth, the people who made Among Us. They are, in fact, the funding arm of Inner Sloth. And they're basically giving money to games like Click Holding, Mars First Logistics, and Flock Around. Tiny games with niche audiences, but experiences that you kind of can't get anywhere else. There ain't that many games like Click Holding. But most important,
this is a big component, right? And this is the reason why, if like the larger a company becomes and the more expansive a company becomes, the less this is possible, because you're bringing in outside investment that has levels of accountability to it that take it away from its original goal. And what that means in like a more basic term is that whenever you're taking other people's money, they're going to want to return for that money. So even if you're creative and you think that it's just, I'm putting the money in to make these games good, somebody that might have part of their money tied up with what you're doing won't have that same outlook. And that's just inevitable. So it's just a corpo funding based on niche ideas? Yeah.
because they're not a publisher, they offer fair recoup rates that let devs build sustainably, which is because, being indie devs themselves, they know that no one else is fighting for them at this scale. At least they hadn't been. We are seeing more and more companies start to do this kind of thing. There's Landfall, the co-developers behind Peak, who have just revealed Evil Landfall, their indie investment arm, which is invested in bringing games like Repo to the market. There's Plasmophobia's Kinetic Games, who have just announced plans to fund 2 to 3 indie games per year.
I'm really happy that we're having this happen. And I'm happy about this on like a very, very large scale cultural level, that we've finally moved away from, and we've had creative people inside of these spaces that now have the capital to fund creative works. Because one of the worst things that can happen to any sort of a creative environment is for it to be taken over by equity and just basically capitalism. And I'm a big capitalism enjoyer, right? I am. I think capitalism is amazing. But at the same time, there are going to be detriments whenever you have people that are trying to just simply take all of this and make as much money as they possibly can. And like, I think about this a lot myself too, that you have, and also one thing that you're going to notice with a lot of these people that are doing this stuff, many of the people that are leading these initiatives are young. It's because I think that a lot of us, like, young, what I mean by young is under 50, right? Is that these are people who have grown up, you know, in like the fucking Wolf of Wall Street, you know, like money never sleeps, fucking, you know, like everybody is trying to make as much money as possible and, you know, like squeeze every cent out of things. And I think that there's a general fatigue with a lot of people that are young about that entire environment. And it's something that I'm really happy to see that now some of these people have been able to gain their own capital, right? They've been able to come up with their own good game and they're paying it forward. And I think another great example of this that we can use is Gary's mod. Like the guy that said, well, like, listen, I'm not going to take all the fucking money because if somebody had done that to me, I would have never been able to make my game, right? And so the moment that you have the cultural paradigm shift away from maximizing income and maximizing revenue towards creating art and making, instead of a product, but making a experience or a work of art, I think that you have a profoundly beneficial and amazing transition. And I think it's a very, very good thing. Very amazing good thing.
So basically, we're seeing indie devs backing indie devs to make sure they actually get
Reinvent
their
publishing.
shot at putting some of their experience to work in a way that'll actually get a game in front of you and hopefully not leave them completely screwed once the game publishes. And that's because right now, just about no one else is going to do this bit right. We've been in a hell of a journey today, starting with the Romeros, the talk of the game crash feeling crashier than the one of the 80s from a dev's perspective. And actually, for their scale of company, just any large enough indie that's got a fairly decent staff count, yeah, I actually do think it is very crashy right
And
now.
this is also one of the reasons why, for me, I wanted to do like the indie, the games show, right? The one that I'm doing, you know, on the monthly thing and everything, right? Is because like I don't have a big game that I had succeed that was like, you know, I have a ton of like extra funding money to do that with. I mean, I have plenty of money I could do that with, but like that's not really that's not my area of expertise. My area of expertise is marketing and promotion. And so like that's the way that I try to do the same thing.
And the sad part of this is it's all at a scale that means
Swear
there's
on
very little you or I can do about it. Now, the funding from Outer Sloth, Landfall, and Kinetic Games, you know, it's good, but it cannot replace billions of investment every year, with indie devs these days getting crumbs compared to, say, well, the good times or the bad good times, by which I mean the investment boom during COVID. Because goddamn, people were able to raise money back then, but, well, booms do tend to lead to bubbles and bursts, don't they? And likewise, these indie funders can't reckon with, say, the scale of funding pulled from the developers that NetEase and Tencent set up during the COVID boom as well. They can't fix an economic crisis that leaves people choosier than ever when it comes to spending money in games. But what they
It's also one of the big problems that they have is that they develop big games like Highguard or Concord or Marathon that at the beginning of the development cycle, the game feels like and seems like it's a really great idea. I think God of War Laufey is probably the same thing, where like if they could probably go back right now and seen how tastes in the market and the culture has changed, they would probably undo that decision and take a different approach with the new God of War game. But you can't really project out, like, and that's the problem whenever you're making content and you're making media that is derivative of a cultural trend, is that, you know, you basically can either lock in a lot of money or you can lock yourself out of any money. It's like a huge risk, huge reward. And the longer that it takes for you to do it, the worse it's going to be. Like Elden Ring, Expedition 33, Baldur's Gate 3, Hollow Knight, Silk Song, I don't know, like I could think of like I don't know, those games, for example, like all of those games, like if they came out 10 years ago or 10 years later, they would still be massively successful because they're fundamentally very good games. But they're like, you know, Slay the Spire 2. If it came out 10 years ago or 10 years from now, it would still be seen as a very good game. Same as Balatro or something like that. But the issue is that whenever you're making games that are much more contingent on the current state of the market, that's a big difference. That's a big problem. And especially true that, and I think that becomes infinitely more true with multiplayer games, because multiplayer games are the ones that really follow trends a lot more heavily than single player games. Single player games generally don't follow trends in the same way.
Do is back devs making games you'll love, the sorts of games that deserve to reach you. And while they cannot save the games industry, they can at least make sure a few more games reach you than if they didn't try. Now, if we really want to fix up the games industry, what we need is more people buying games. And the best way to do that is to make sure people can actually find games they'll love. This is now a problem that's so bad that one of the guys who set up...
The problem is that people don't buy video games because they don't have any money. I think the main issue and what's going to really help the games industry is if honestly, like, I'll be real, I think AI and the fixation that certain people have against AI is really detrimental to the games industry. Because AI will advance gaming and it will make costs cheaper and it will make it easier to develop things. But right now, inside of Western markets, there's such a massive animus against it. At least I don't think it's really as big as people make it out to be, but, like on social media, it seems to be quite large. These people that are against that, they're basically signing up these different companies to fail, especially in companies like Brazil where the games are extremely expensive. Yeah, of course, right? And I think it especially becomes more true inside of developing countries. You're right. They're still going to charge a stupid amount, though. Yeah, but they can at least get the game out the door, right? The other times they can't even get the game out the door.
Steam Labs is basically sounding the alarm bell.
Yeah.
If you want to learn all about that story, check out this video next.
It's mainly because there's more slop than ever. Yeah, I agree with you, but I think that slop is not exclusive to AI. I think that there's plenty of slop that's being made by people. What are the devs? What's this here? What are the devs who made models and textures going to do if AI takes your job? I don't know. They could work in a different field. They could go learn a different trade. They could educate themselves in another way. Like, there's dozens of things that they could do. Like, ultimately, I don't really care a lot about their job because why would I don't have any obligation to have to pay more money for a video game just because, somebody else wants to keep their job. Learn the code, learn to do something else, right? And it's just that simple. I like this video. I like talking about this a lot, especially like the metagame stuff. I definitely do. In relation to what you're talking about, how is cloud gaming going to affect all these issues? Cloud gaming, I think, is going to make I don't know, actually. That's a good question, because it could be a bad thing because it could make optimization less important because you're doing database computing rather than local computing. So I'm not entirely sure about that, but I think it probably would make things cheaper if I had to guess, but I actually don't have an answer for that. I don't know what the answer for that is at all. Nothing's time for people who design textures to use AI. Remember that? Yeah, and also like the replacement, it's not going to be people that use textures are all getting fired. It's going to be the best texture guy and the second best texture guy keep their jobs, and the other 8 texture guys get fired. So AI is not going to replace everybody. It's going to just simply enable one person to do 5 people's jobs. And I think that's really what's happened more than anything. Entry level will be hit harder. Yeah, entry level gets hit harder. Data entry or anything like that gets hit massively hard. I just think that's what's happening generally. And have you ever interviewed or teamed up with Bellier on anything? Oh, I've talked to Bellier before. Yeah, I definitely have. And for sure. Let me go back. I'll see if I can find any more of these other posts here. I'm trying to, and exactly what happened with automation hit. Yeah. I mean, in automation and everything like that, it's just going to become the norm with everything, right? I think that's obviously true. So cloud gaming has been tried and failed every time. There used to be one in 2010s called OnLive, and they shut it down. Insane ping, you can't use it for anything besides gaming. I disagree that I think cloud gaming is the future in a long enough timeline. I think it is. And people might not want to hear that because it's more you'll own nothing and be happy. But I think that people will acquiesce to that and prefer it in the same way that people have preferred Netflix over owning DVDs. So what I think is happening is that now you have things like Parsec, for example, and most video games, actually not most, but like many video games don't require instantaneous fast reaction gameplay. And like if you think about it, right? most games don't require a under 150 millisecond response time. They do not. I'll go through and let's just look and figure it out for ourselves, right? We're going to go at the top. Let's see. Does this game require a response time like that? Not really. Does First Light require that level of response time? Probably not. Age of Empires 2? No, definitely it doesn't. AI limit? Yeah, maybe to dodge, but I bet you could probably play that in Parsec as well, especially if you can read animations. So if you just go down here, Among Us, obviously it doesn't. Animal Well, obviously it doesn't. Nether Crab's Treasure? Maybe, because you have to dodge. Arc Raiders? Probably it does require that because you're playing against other people and it's a competitive game. Armored Core 6? It does not require that. Ashes of Creation? It's a dead game. Who cares? Atomic Picnic does not require that at all. Avatar, I never played it. Avowed does not require an MS. So, like, what my point is that many of these games actually do not require hyper fast reactions. They don't require hyper fast reactions. So cloud gaming, and I think that those are the games that people play all the time too. They do. Wrong? It's not wrong. You're so wrong. I'm not wrong. You're going to see it happen. You're going to see it happen. You're already seeing it happen. Your point is the games that are bought does not require? Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of these. I mean, NVIDIA Reflex anyway, cloud's the next step to the death of PC gaming. Yeah, I mean, like, you can get mad. Like, don't shoot the messenger. Like, don't get mad at me. This is just what's going to happen. Like, that's it. You're funny thinking 150 ms is not 400 ms? I've used cloud gaming services recently. This isn't Google Stadia from 2016. Parsec is a free service that you can download and you can try it for yourself. And try it for yourself and see what the difference is. It's not as big as you think it is. And I would challenge anybody to make those decisions. Like, try this and try it for yourself. See what it's actually like. It's called Parsec. Connect to work or games from anywhere. Is a remote desktop you'll actually love, quick to work. And I use this myself. And where wins me, the top player uses GeForce Now, similar to Parsec, I guess. I don't know about that. So yeah, GeForce Now is pretty good, but it's pricey. Yeah, and that's what's going to happen. Steam Remote Play, etc. It's not an ad. We used Parsec to play games that were in the show that we did. What was it called? Fucking Pixel Pitch. Yeah. And you're partially right. It's not required, but it feels like shit, even for the peasants. You push the button and Mario doesn't jump. Yeah. You guys aren't, like, everybody's opinions and, like, fucking, like, that's not what's happening anymore. Download one of these softwares and try it. That, like, again, like, I don't, has anybody ever even done this? Like, just literally try it out. As I thought what you thought until I tried it. Yeah, just do it. Or don't. Watch somebody else do it. Do you think in the future there'll be a service that includes all games and all platforms you can sub to monthly and just play them from a cloud? No, I don't think so because of publishing rights. But I do think so it would be possible theoretically. Yes, absolutely. Depends on actual bandwidth, internet, not the cloud app gaming itself. It depends. There's like 3 different variables. But yeah. Then I don't care. I already pirate everything. I don't own it. These services give me nothing. That's fine, but they're going to make things harder to pirate. Like, I mean, obviously they're going to do that. I play on PlayStation Portal and I don't feel the difference from playing natively. Yeah, exactly. Like, people don't understand how good this is, and they're still using anecdotes from literally 10 years ago. Completely antiquated anecdotes. All right? That's what I think it is.